Hello, everybody. Greetings to all. Welcome to the Snooker Hall podcast. I am Dan Murren. The 2025 UK Championship is in the books, and a huge congratulations go to Mark Selby, now a three-time winner of that illustrious tournament. Snooker fans were treated to a superb week of snooker, and there's a lot to talk about, not just about what happened in York, but so far this season. It's hard to believe that we are at the halfway point of the season already. It kicked off at the end of June with the Championship League, more than 5 months ago now, and incredibly, there are only 5 months left until we know the identity of the 2026 World Champion. It seems like a good time to pause, for a day or two anyway, take stock and analyse what has been, in some ways, a fairly unusual season, I think it's fair to say. To provide some expert insight, I have a very special guest with me today on the Snooker Hall podcast. He is one of the most recognisable and respected voices in snooker, and for years has provided colourful, informative commentary on this sport which we love so much. It's a pleasure for me to welcome Phil Yates to the Snooker Hall podcast.
The pleasure's all mine, Dan.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time. It's always nice to chat about snooker with a fellow fan. There's a lot happening at the moment. I guess the most prominent storyline is we've just had the UK Championship. You've been working on the Moscone Cup, so maybe you haven't seen all of it, but you're pretty clued up on what went on there, right?
Well, yeah, I thought the championship itself was intriguing. It's always good to see a big major event featuring four terrific players in the semi-finals, because that's what the event deserves. For me, I worked on the first 3 days for TNT Sports. My abiding impression of the championship was just how tight the pockets were. Now, I don't know whether that was a conscious reaction to what had occurred at the International Championship, where they were rather large. But I just wonder, whether pockets as tight as that is a good thing. Obviously, certain players were saying it was brilliant for them, and, it's a good thing for the leading players. And obviously the result bore that out, four terrific players in the semi-finals, totally quality quartet. But over those first 3 days I worked, the number of centuries were drastically down, and the highest break was only 111, so that told its own story. I don't think the middle pockets were any different to what they normally are, but the corners most certainly were. And if you're looking at the table on a TV screen, the top right-hand pocket was absolutely brutal. Anyway, Mark Selby can deal with anything. He is the greatest, I think, all-round player we've ever seen. He's known as a grinder. Yeah, sometimes. But he's also an absolutely fantastic break builder, which we saw in the final yesterday. And he's got such great heart. But the thing that sets him apart for me, the tactical awareness and one particular niche aspect of his game. No one could tell me any different. When it comes to escaping snookers and doing no damage, he's the best of all time by a country mile.
I think this pockets discussion has come up a lot this week. Neil Robertson made a remark. He had a little mini rant about it, and I suppose it's hard to disagree. We got a bit of correspondence on that actually, and I'll bring that up in a minute. But the tactical side of Mark Selby's game is a huge factor in why he's so successful. But I do think it's used as almost like a weapon against him, that he can't do the other side of the game. It's like he clearly can. He's approaching 1,000 centuries. I think he's over 900, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I think it's easy to pigeonhole people and to say they're certain types, oh, he's this, he's that. Selby's everything, and that's why he's had so much success. And I'll tell you something else about him. He's got unlimited bottle when it comes to those tight finishes, as we saw at the end of the final. So, yeah, it really is totally incorrect to describe him as just a grinder, the tormentor or whatever he's been called. He's an absolutely fantastic scorer and potter as well. So, every credit to him. I think he's one of the all-time greats. And, of course, he keeps adding to his legacy.
So that's 10 Triple Crown titles, 25 ranking tournaments now, I believe.
Yes, and the point is, if you get into the 20s, you then basically, especially playing in this modern era, you then basically tell the world, I am simply superb at this game. what you've got to realise with the likes of Selby and everyone who wins these days, victory in 2025 in any tournament means so much more than it did 30, 20, maybe even 10 years ago, because the game is so competitive now. We were talking before we started this, Dan, about the fact that you can't achieve perfection in any sport, and that is true. But in snooker right now, you can't achieve domination. And of course, this is a game, the pro game, that was always known for one dominant figure from 1927 right through until his retirement from the World Championship in 1946. The great Joe Davis was undefeated. Then Fred Davis won it, I think, 8 times. You go into the 70s when the game was revived. It was Ray Reardon who was the man. 80s, Steve Davis. 90s, Stephen Hendry. Nowadays, we have so many different winners purely and simply because the overall standard is so good. And it's not just top 16, top 32. The top 64, the top 80 are better now than they've ever been.
I think one of the people who's often left out of that discussion, Ronnie O'Sullivan. Okay, he's won more than anyone else, but over such a long period of time, I suppose the odds are in his favour, given how good he is at the sport. But I would say it's difficult to say that Ronnie has truly dominated any one era, like Hendry did, like Davis did, like Reardon did. But he's always been there, and he's always been dangerous. But I think if Ronnie O'Sullivan can't even dominate, I would say that Mark Selby dominated the 2010s more than Ronnie O'Sullivan ever dominated an era, I would say.
Yeah, I will say this. Ronnie O'Sullivan...
If domination is a thing, even.
Yeah, Ronnie O'Sullivan is the GOAT. He's the greatest player of all time. I always thought that Stephen Hendry would retain that status, but I've changed my mind now. If people have heard this story before, I apologise in advance. The first time I played Ronnie O'Sullivan, when he was 10 years old, basically, I used to go to a club near me in Old Hill in the West Midlands called On Cue. And Ronnie came up to the club with his father. They were visiting his grandparents in the nearby town of Netherton. And basically, the club owner said to me, rang me up and said, "There's a young lad here, wants somebody to play." So I went up to the club. Immediately, I recognised him because even at the age of 10, his photograph had already been in snooker scene. His name had been mentioned on several occasions. So we went over onto the match table, which I used to play on all the time, so I knew it like the back of my hand. He's 10 years old. He can hardly reach the table. So I smacked them up from the back. And his first ever shot on the table made something like a 56 break. After that short session, I thought, he's the chosen one. The following year, I played him again when he came up to see his grandparents once more, and he'd grown considerably. And by that stage, I was absolutely convinced. I knew that he was going to be the greatest player of all time. It was just apparent he'd got that special something. He'd been touched by greatness. And I'll say this as a compliment. Ronnie O'Sullivan, for all he's achieved, I personally think is an underachiever, because there have been lots of tournaments where he's tuned out, not been motivated, and I reckon he could have won even more. His ability stands alone. He's not just one of the greatest snooker players of all time. In my opinion, he is the greatest. I think he's one of the greatest British sportsmen of all time.
Seeing someone who's that young, because you're, as far as I know, you're pretty handy with the cue yourself, right?
I couldn't pot a ball now. I haven't played for 29 years. When I was playing back then, I was a reasonable, above average league player, sort of, I could occasionally make a century. Made lots of 50, 60s. Yeah, made lots of 50, 60s. So I won like local individual events, but nothing that would ever stamp me as anywhere near pro level. I mean, I was certainly better than maybe 50 or 60 other players who did turn pro in 1991, who were more dreamers than realists. But I knew I'd never make a penny piece playing the game. But I loved it. That was the main thing. I played literally 7 days a week. The only time I ever was away from the table was when I went up to the Open Golf Championship, or when I did some caddying. I used to caddy on the tour. That was the only time I was ever not playing. And this was at night, by the way. I got a full-time job. So, yeah, it was job, get back home, get something down me, and off to the snooker hall to play. I was just obsessed by the game, and I think I always will be.
Seeing someone who's 10 years old, 11 years old, like they're not even a teenager yet, and you could just see that there's something there. And we've heard it recently with Judd Trump as well. Even at 10 years old, people could see, yeah, he's got it, the X factor. Arsene Wenger said that if you haven't got the technical ability to be a top level footballer at the age of 14, forget it. You will never, ever make it at the top level, no matter what. Do you think it's the same with snooker?
Maybe not quite that age, but certainly I think if you don't hit the heights by your 20s, when I say hit the heights, I mean play to a very competent level, I think it would be very difficult. Larry Nelson, the famous golfer, who had a tremendous Ryder Cup record and won majors as well. He won the US Open and the USPGA. He was a real latecomer into the sport. I think he only started playing seriously, not even professionally, seriously, when he was in his late 20s. But that's a real exception to the rule. I think you've got to have so many reps. You've got to play and have it ingrained in your life to be able to compete at the highest level. And of course, O'Sullivan did that from a very early age. Yeah, when I saw him play, as I say, when he was 10, 11, I knew he was going to be something special. I knew he was going to be a great entertainer. I knew he was going to be famous. You never really know whether anybody can be world champion. That was the great thing for me when Jack Lazowski won. People were saying, oh, it was only a matter of time. It wasn't a matter of time, because that's the great thing about sport. You know, you're not guaranteed. Look, I saw Jimmy White play an exhibition when he was 16 at a club very close to me. And I was absolutely convinced, and so was my father, who knew a lot about the game. We were absolutely convinced he was going to be world champion. And very sadly, it never happened.
Nearly, but I mean, he came about as close as you can without doing it, really.
Yeah, and I'm of the belief he's won 10 world ranking titles. He's won the Masters. He's made a 147, obviously, on a big occasion. He's got to 6 world finals. Is that a better career than someone who won a world championship and didn't do an awful lot else? Well, I think it is.
See, that's a good debate. Is Jimmy White a more successful player than, say, Stuart Bingham or Luca Brissell?
Well, obviously, Brissell's got time on his side, and I would say Bingham is, absolutely terrific in the sense that he's not just won the World Championship, he's also won multiple world ranking titles, and he's won the Masters. So, yeah, I wouldn't say Brissell in that debate, and I certainly wouldn't say because of his age, and I certainly wouldn't say Bingham either. But, look, Joe Johnson is a really good friend of mine. I do a lot of work with him, and when he won the World Championship in 1986, it was an absolutely terrific story. Phenomenal. He played the best snooker of his life when it mattered most. It was a star-crossed fortnight. Did he have a better career than Jimmy White? Well, he certainly rose to a higher pinnacle because he won at the Crucible, but was the career overall as good as White's?
I don't know. I don't know.
The classic, of course, and I'm using a golf analogy as well, Colin Montgomerie. Montgomerie won 8 European Tour Order of Merits. He won countless tournaments everywhere. He was an absolutely terrific player, and he was a talisman in the European Ryder Cup team. Now, is he more successful than, say, Ben Curtis, the surprise winner of the 2003 Open, or Todd Hamilton, the surprise winner of the 2004 Open? The answer most definitely is yes.
Yeah. Someone like Mike Weir, who was who's the other one? Oh no, Mark O'Meara, he won 2. Yeah, Mark O'Meara won 2. Mike Weir is the one I'm thinking of. The Canadian.
Yeah, I mean, Curtis and Hamilton are the prime examples. I mean, Ben Curtis came from nowhere to win it. But that's the great thing about sport. You can have these surprise winners. That's what makes it so engrossing, so captivating. You never quite know. Look at Leicester City, 5,000 to 1 when they won the Premier League. These shocks happen. It's about backing them up, I suppose.
I brought this up a couple of times recently on the podcast. Roger Federer, or the factor which separates the truly great tennis players, so Roger Federer's, Rafa Nadal's, I think there is a slight difference there, and I think we can make a comparison with snooker. For example, if Rafa Nadal felt that he was on the bad end of an umpire's call, you could see the rage, and he was winning the next point, almost to stick it to the umpire. Roger Federer said that he won 54% of all the points he ever played. But it showed that he won the important points. When the pressure's on, he delivered. Novak Djokovic, how many times did we see him when it's 3-3 or 4-4 in a set, then he breaks? Breaking at 1-1, okay, your opponent has a chance maybe to regroup, but when it's 3-3, 4-4, that's when you can actually kill the frame or the set or the match in one moment. And that's what separates the greats, I think. Joe Johnson won that World Championship. No one can take that away from him. No one can say it was a fluke. He played great snooker, and he just played better than the other guys.
And let me tell you something as well. He wins championships every day of his life because he's such a nice guy. He's great company as well. So, yeah, he wins every day of his life, does Joe. He's no ordinary Joe, as they said at the time.
But you saw the first few days of the UK Championship. What were the standout stories for you?
Well, I think, obviously, look, the standout story is always the champion, Selby. You see, he is the first multiple winner of the season. Before the UK Championship, I think we'd had 11 events, 11 different winners, so every credit to him. I think it's really good that Judd got to the final. We want to see Judd Trump playing well because, much like Ronnie O'Sullivan, he's a phenomenal entertainer, apart from being a serial winner. Shaun Murphy, he's had a great season, and I'm sure he will be lifting silverware in the not-too-distant future. What I thought was quite interesting, actually, okay, the class of 92 in this year's championship didn't have the best of times. But look at Selby. Look at Neil Robertson. Look at Shaun Murphy. They're well into their 40s now. And people are saying, the class of 92, it's remarkable. They're still going at 50. Well, I personally think Selby, Robertson, Murphy, and a few others will still be at the top of the game when they're 50.
Shaun Murphy's a good example in this, actually. He won the World Championship. That was his first that was his breakthrough almost. And if you're going to break through, I suppose that's kind of the way to do it. But it took him a little while to complete the Triple Crown. Then he won the Masters earlier this year. I was there for the final, and I couldn't have been happier for him. Has he got better with age?
I think his best has. Shaun Murphy has always been the same. When he won the World Championship in 2005, he did me an enormous favour, gave me massive brownie points. I was so fortunate. Basically, I wrote my preview for the Times because I was Times snooker correspondent for a large number of years. Wrote the big preview for the Times, and there was a small gap still to be filled. So one of the subs there said, look, can you do a piece which outlines who you think will be a good outsider to win the event? Well, I thought, there are no good outsiders, to be honest. And then I saw Shaun's draw. He was playing Chris Small in the first round. Now, Small, by that stage, was struggling physically, and I knew he wasn't playing particularly well. So I thought, well, if I big up Shaun Murphy, at least he's going to be involved for the first week or maybe 9 days. So I'll get some value out of him. And, of course, what does he do? He goes on and wins the thing. And they reprinted that little article the day after the World Championship final. So, yeah, I mean, it was really lucky on my part, but there was no luck involved with Shaun. When he came to potting from distance, I don't think the Crucible had seen anything like it. Now, present day, I think when he plays his best is as good as anyone's. And that's a real compliment because there are so many players who can play to a ridiculously high standard. I think his finest performance ever to win a tournament was a couple of years ago. He won the Players' Championship and then shortly afterwards the Tour Championship. Now, at the Tour Championship, yeah, he was good. But at the Players' Championship, he was unplayable. It was a case of knock in a red from distance, make a big break. Blueprint, blueprint, blueprint. And no one could stop him. I think the two finest performances I've ever seen from a player to win a tournament actually occurred at the Players' Championship. One was John Higgins. You might recall when he beat Mark Selby 6-0 and restricted Selby to 7 points in that match.
Yep.
And then he did almost the same thing to Kyron Wilson subsequently. Higgins in that event was out of this world. And then at the Players' Championship that Sean Murphy won, he was the same. The magician really was doing all kinds of tricks that no one could quite believe.
He pulled some rabbits out of the hat.
Well, I think he pulled a lion and an elephant out of the hat at certain points. He was so good.
I got them mixed up. That would be a magician who pulls the rabbit out of the hat. What would the wizard do? The wizard would just make a new elephant.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I need to get my analogies in line. Yeah. For me, one of the big stories, Ronnie O'Sullivan, the aforementioned Ronnie O'Sullivan, went out in the first round. Zhou Yulong. Okay, Zhou Yulong's had a solid season. He hasn't won a trophy yet in his career or this season, but he's finally got a win over Ronnie O'Sullivan. I don't think Ronnie played that badly, but I don't know, there's just something. He had a few good moments earlier in the season. He made the final in Riyadh or Jeddah? It was Jeddah, wasn't it? But apart from that, it's been a little bit hit and miss for Ronnie O'Sullivan. And I think this was just another example of miss rather than what we expect from him.
Yeah, I'll start with the positives. When he got to the final of the Saudi Arabia Snooker Masters, I was actually in the most unlikely location. I was in the Wolf's Den Pool Club in Roanoke, Virginia, commentating on a tournament there. Basically, we had a 3-week spell in America where we did the Florida Open in Orlando. Then myself and Carl Boys drove up to Virginia to do this event called the Battle of the Bull. And then following that, we went over to the US Open in Atlantic City. Anyway, I'm in this pool hall in Roanoke, Virginia, with the Appalachian Mountains all around, and I'm thinking, no one knows snooker here. So the day he made the 2 147s, the first one went in. Carl Boyce came up to me. I was commentating. He said, Ronnie's just made a 147. The second 147 went in, and this American guy, who I didn't know, came up and said, Ronnie's just made another 147. And it was then that I realised just how well known he was, not just on this side of the Atlantic, but on the other. And I got talking to quite a few fans over there about snooker in general and about O'Sullivan in particular. And he's held in the very highest regard, you know. I don't think we appreciate just how big snooker is in the States. Anyway, that's my story. Of course, he lost in the final to Neil Robertson, who I was chatting to, funnily enough, at the next Saudi Arabian event. And he was saying he regards that win. He was well in front when 9-8 down, 110-9. He regards that win as potentially his greatest ever achievement. So that's the positive from O'Sullivan. Back at the Riyadh Season Championship, he was beaten 4-0 by Sean Murphy, who was playing well at the time. Murphy then subsequently lost to Zhao Xintong in the quarterfinals, but Murphy played superbly even in that match when he was beaten. So Murphy was clearly in form. O'Sullivan might have been a little bit rusty, but he doesn't like to lose 4-0. You know, when you've spent your entire life driving a Rolls Royce and then you're suddenly in a situation where you can't quite get to that level in terms of transportation, it's hard to take. And when O'Sullivan has been right at the top of the tree, the man, undoubtedly, and now he's 50 years of age, maybe the realisation is hit that his career could be in decline. Eventually will be. That's inevitable because of the passage of time. It must be very hard to take because he's always been the benchmark. And so for him to lose to Murphy was hard. I think it was a tough draw for him in York. Zhou Yulong is a very accomplished player. He's now in the conversation, by the way, since the wins for Jack Lisowski and Wu Yiza. Zhou Yulong is in the conversation. Best player yet to win a ranking event. I would put Zhou Yulong in there with Elliot Slesser and Sergio Wei. So it wasn't an easy draw for O'Sullivan. But I think he's going through a slump, if you like. And it would be nice to see him play in the Masters and come back to his best, because when O'Sullivan's firing, there is no one better to watch.
So this idea of Zhou Yulong being the best player yet to win a ranking tournament, I think there's a lot to be said for this, and I've said this before on this podcast. At the start of the season, or just before the start of the season, I was speaking with Michael Day, the editor of Totally Snookered, and among the Chinese players, the common opinion was that the most likely players to win or win their maiden ranking title would be Wu Yize and Su Xiaowei. And I cannot see it for Su Xiaowei anytime soon. I just can't. I just don't think he's good enough at the moment.
Well, I think in terms of queuing and in terms of long potting, definitely. I think he needs to sharpen up his safety and tactical approach, no doubt. What I thought was very interesting, actually, I commentated on both of his first two matches at the World Championship this year. And while he won them both, he was a little lucky at times, and he certainly didn't play his best. It seemed to me he didn't know whether to stick or twist. He didn't know what the best tactic was. And so, consequently, at times when you thought he'd take one on, he was playing safe, or at times when you thought he'd play safe, he was taking one on. I think he's got to make his mind up and play to his strengths, because from an attacking standpoint, he's an elite player. He does need to learn the finer points of the game. There's no doubt about that. But I think that will come with time. I think when he's on, he's capable of big things, Su Xiaowei. But against a more tactically astute player, he might have difficulties.
Well, the players that I thought were more likely to win were Zhou Yulong and maybe slightly outside of the box, Pang Junzhu. I think as an all-round player, honestly, I think Pang Junzhu is better. And I think he's more likely to have the game to win a tournament. Okay, maybe not become world champion at this point in his career, but would it be a huge surprise if Pang Junzhu made it to the Scottish Open final? We saw it with Lei Pei Fan last year. It's not that outlandish a prediction. I would bet on him over Su Xiaowei.
Well, in 2023, Pang Junzhu did something remarkable in the space of a couple of months. He beat his own personal best in a ranking event 3 consecutive times. So he got to a quarterfinal for the first time, then his first semi-final, and then he got to the final of the WST Classic, losing to Mark Selby at the Mattioli Arena. You know, I really respect Pang Junzhu for one thing. He gets more out of himself than I think any player I've ever seen. He practices all hours God sends. We know that. He's not the most talented. He is very methodical, actually.
Yep.
But he tries so hard. He's extremely dedicated. He doesn't let anything bother him. He's ultra competitive. And yeah, for someone who doesn't have a God-given talent, I think he's doing remarkable things.
There is one negative with Pang Junzhu, I would say. And I was at the Crucible to watch his match against Zhang Anda. And I'm going to say, the worst session of snooker I've ever seen live. It was a drag, a real drag. And I wonder how sustainable that can be. Joe Perry was on commentary and he used he used the expression, "This is tough going." And Joe Perry was absolutely spot on. It was tough to watch, but how much emotional energy, how much physical energy and mental focus that takes just to get 2 hours, 3 frames. Oh, you can't do that for 17 days. He's a young man. You would fancy him to have more physical and mental stamina than someone like of Ronnie O'Sullivan's age, for example. But he's going to have to adapt his game. Talent and hard work is one thing, but I suppose knowing how to play, and that's where you become Mark Selby. That's the sign of greatness, I guess. It's not just knowing what to do; it's how to do it and capitalizing when strike when the iron's hot, I guess.
Dan, I feel your pain. I commentated on that match at the Crucible, and it was the second consecutive year that Zhang has played very poorly in the first round. If you recall, he lost to Jack Jones the previous year. Yeah,
I predicted it. Yep.
Yeah. He was very poor, Zhang. He, right from the start, was struggling, and I mean, Jones said it himself after the first round. I think he was surprised that he'd played well below his own level and still ended up winning the match. But yeah, Pang, I think he could win a tournament which is predominantly best of sevens, nines, and then you get to a 2-session final. The way he plays, I would find it inconceivable that he could win the World Championship, because purely and simply, after 17 days of slogging it away like that, I don't think he'd have the mental stamina. He would certainly have the physical stamina, but I don't think he'd have the mental stamina to be able to come through that, well, as Clive Everton used to say, the marathon of the mind. That said, though, certain players have done it over the years. I always thought that Peter Ebdon, he incredible bottle and unmatched desire. I always thought that the way he approached things with such burning intensity, I always thought that would be against him at the World Championship. But of course, in 2002, I was proved conclusively incorrect when he beat Hendry in the final.
Yeah, he made 3 finals. He won a UK Championship as well, did he not, Peter Ebdon?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, honestly, I've never seen anyone who believes he can win like Ebdon. Players say, I always thought I was going to win. He really thought it. Even when he was 4-0 down in a best of 9, he thought he was going to win. I'll tell you a match Ebdon played, which summed it up for me. We were in Dubai, so it was the early 90s. He played Jimmy White. 4-0 up at the interval, Ebdon was. White came back brilliantly afterwards to get it to 4-4, and you thought, oh, White's got all the momentum in the world, he's going to win this. Ebdon toughed it out in that deciding frame, and I thought, well, good on you. It was amazing to me that he got that mental strength. When it comes to categorising players, mental strength, top of that department, Peter Ebdon.
And I dislike this narrative that because he was mentally tough and he was able to, if he had to make things messy, scrappy, slow it down, grind, that's all he could do. And that's absolutely not the case. That pink ball he potted against Matthew Stevens, I think it was, in the semis of the World Championship. It might have been 2002, actually.
Yes, it was, yeah.
It possibly, given the context, maybe not the single best shot, but possibly the bravest shot of all time.
You know,
it's got to be up there.
When I first saw him play, he wasn't a grinder at all. He was very, very attacking. It was when he played for England in the home internationals at Pontins in Prestatyn. He could play all kinds of ways. Ebdon, you know, made one of the great 147s. It was 1991, I believe, and he was playing at 10 o'clock in the morning in a qualifier. First frame, 147. Now, that takes some doing. Mind you, I will say this, by the way, and I've got to get this point over. We were just talking about Shaun Murphy, and there's been a lot of chat this season about 147s. I've just written a piece in Snooker Scene about them, actually. In terms of the most unlikely, unexpected, brilliant 147 there's ever been, not the most important, not the most high profile, but the most unexpected, it has to be Murphy's in the shootout. I did the first ever shootout, and I went up there convinced that no one would make a century. In fact, there was a bookmaker on site, and I had a tenner on at 20-1 that there wouldn't be a century break made in the tournament. I was convinced it was impossible. Now, obviously, you do see centuries over the years, and good luck to the guys who make them. But to make a 147 in that format, 15 seconds for the first 5 minutes, 10 seconds for the next 5 minutes, I think it was just one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen on a snooker table.
I like to look at the positives in things, and some people have said, "Oh, it's luck." How can a 147 be luck? I just don't get that. I do feel sorry for Bulsu Revez, who turns up one shot and then he goes home. But at least he got to witness that firsthand, because it's the chances of us seeing that again, I've got to say, pretty slim.
I would say I would be astounded if it happened. Of course, he wasn't the only person that happened to. I think it was Mink Nutcherat. She was playing Rory Thor, and this is before Mink was on the tour. So she's playing in the shootout, and with all due respect to Rory Thor, you don't expect this kind of heroics from him. But the Malaysian, it was incredible. She broke off, and he cleared up with 130 odd. Again, to do that in the shootout, I mean, that's just off the charts ridiculous.
I remember the shootout final, and I actually have a few notes on the shootout that's coming up. But the shootout final, it was Chris Wakeland's year, and he was against the Belgian beast, Julian Leclerc, or Leclerc.
Leclerc.
Leclerc. I know the Formula One driver, Charles Leclerc. But I think there's been some debate about this on Dave Hendon's podcast. Someone disagrees. But anyway, but Julien, we'll call him, he didn't really get a look in that final frame. And you hear it all the time. Oh, all I wanted was a chance. And if you have the chance and you blow it, okay, then at least you know. It's like Dave Gilbert in that deciding frame against John Higgins. He would like to see how far he could have gone, but the kick scuppered him. And you always, especially when it's a one-frame match, when someone wins it with a break of 122, it's just, oh, I didn't really get a chance. Maybe they did, but more often than not, they don't. But that's the brutal nature of the shootout, and I don't think that's a problem. If someone's good enough to put it away in one visit, then good for them.
It was much easier for Leclerc to get over that defeat. Wakelin made 119 break, by the way. It was much easier for Leclerc to get over that defeat than, say, Liam Graham in last year's final. He should have won. Absolutely no doubt about it. He blew his chance, and look what that would have led to in terms of extra ranking points, a place in the Champion of Champions, which would have been phenomenal for him. So, yeah, going away from the event for Graham, I think he would have had a lot more regrets than someone who never got a poke, as they say.
It leads me into another. I love segues, and that's an interesting way to bring in this next segue, because there are some players on the tour who, let's be honest, need the ranking points. Some, for example, Judd Trump, he can afford to skip the shootout. He's not desperate for ranking points. But there are some players who are maybe near that cutoff point of relegation and survival. A good run at the shootout, even if it's to the quarterfinals, that might be the difference between survival and relegation. I think it's easy to dismiss. Okay, it's 50,000 points for the winner. But that's still 50,000 points. All you need is a few good days, a bit of luck goes your way here and there. And you potentially, obviously, you could win a ranking tournament. The additional supplemental bonuses, should we say? Like the appearance in the Champion of Champions. But those ranking points could be crucial. And I think for the players, I think they might appreciate that more than fans do.
When I started covering the shootout, it was 64 players, no ranking points. It was at the Tower Circus in Blackpool, where we're going to be again later this week. And it was a really fun tournament. I went up there with an open mind. I'm more a traditionalist than an innovator. So I thought, well, I'll reserve judgment. From the moment it started, I absolutely loved it. I don't enjoy the constant call-outs on the yellow and when someone uses the rest and they shout cheat stick and all this. I don't enjoy that kind of repetitious crowd involvement. I do enjoy crowd involvement, and I'll never forget the very first shootout at Blackpool. A member of the audience came out with what I regard as still the funniest line ever said at the shootout. It was Steve Davis against Peter Ebdon, funnily enough. And they started off, and there'd been about 4 minutes of play without a ball being potted, and this guy shouted, "This has got 0-0 written all over it," which I thought was very funny. Now, a lot of people get hysterical about the fact that the shootout these days has ranking points. And some winners, Tom Ford, Anthony McGill, have said it shouldn't really. I've got no great objection to it, other than if it ever absolutely took off and you had, well, a load of shootouts during a season, I wouldn't like that. One's enough. And B, if the prize money went up significantly, I think that would skew the rankings in a rather unfair way. But just one event with a £50,000 first prize and 50,000 ranking points, I've got no objection to that. It is not snooker as we know it. It isn't really. And I suppose if you win the shootout and you've not won another ranking event, there is the temptation to put a mental asterisk next to the achievement. But as an entertainment, and that's what professional sport is all about, entertainment. As an entertainment, I've got no objections to it whatsoever. I'll be watching this week, definitely.
I love it. And to your point, I spoke to Kevin Dabrowski at the English Open, and a lot of the narrative was, oh, it's his first ranking event final. And he told me, well, actually, it's not. I've actually refereed the shootout final twice. But I didn't know that. Referees which game. But it's, for him, it wasn't that he was offended, but just let's not forget that the shootout is a real tournament too. At the moment, it's a ranking event. Some disagree, some agree. I think it's worthy of it. And one event a year is what makes it acceptable and special almost. And I know some players will skip it because, well, I could be there for 10 minutes and I have to go home. All right, fine. Don't go then. No one's forcing you to. It has more gravitas amongst the professionals than I think some people realise.
And it can transform a player's career. I got really involved. I wasn't working on the event, so I was able to get emotionally involved when my pal Stephen Hallworth got to the latter stages a few years ago. And if you know someone well and they go deep, I think it's absolutely great to be supporting them and wondering whether they can get over the line, because it is such a toss of the coin for one thing. But also, you look at the list of winners, a lot of them have been really good players, sensible players. Some you might think, well, I'm surprised he won it, or I'm surprised he hasn't won it. The player I always think would be absolutely suited down to the ground for the shootout is Rob Milkins. He plays very, very quickly. He is a sensible player in the sense he knows all about the game. And I think, yeah, if he popped up and lifted the trophy, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
And of course, he has the experience of winning real ranking events, so he won't be overawed by the occasion. He's been 30 years now. He's experienced. And his ability to pop balls, and just saying it like that in the simple terms, his ability to pop balls he's a good snooker player. it's no, I agree. He would be, on paper, you would think, yeah, why not? Why hasn't he won it?
Yeah, I mean, when you win the Gibraltar Open and you also win the Welsh Open, that just tells me if you win those two, you can definitely win the shootout. And I think he's got the game and also the ability to think quickly to be able to put him amongst the favourites. But there are really no favourites for that, are there? I can't
No.
I think you've got to play to a certain standard. There are people, wildcard entries and juniors and stuff like that, who've got no experience on these tables. I think you would have to, ignore their chances. And maybe some of the really lower ranked players as well. But I think pretty much everybody in the field, well, 90% of the people in the field have got a hope of capturing the title.
That I did. You mentioned Stephen Hallworth there. I spoke to him last year on this podcast before the shootout, and he wasn't actually invited that year. He was on the Q Tour last season. But I asked him about the tactics, the shot clock. How much does that impact the way you play? And almost how do you, if you think your opponent might struggle with it, there are so many factors that shot clock can affect. And I asked him about it, and he would know more than he would know more than you. It's, for me, that different, it's that different environment. It's something different. It's something new. I'm all for it. I think it's not the one tournament I look out for at the start of the season, but I know I'm going to sit there and watch 3 days of snooker because, you know what, it's fun and I want to be entertained.
And
I probably will be.
It fries people's brains as well. I mean, I've seen some ridiculous tactical choices and some ridiculous occasions where people have gone needlessly for a ball when the time is running out. Just get it safe. That's all you need to do. And then, the time point equation is completely impossible for the other guy. And yet, it's this mentality. This is a frame of snooker. It isn't. It's 10 minutes of snooker. That's the big advice I would give to everybody involved in the forthcoming event. Look, if you go 20 in front with 7 minutes left, I'm not suggesting you should shut up shop, park the bus. But I think when it gets down to the last minute and you're 15 in front of something, just don't take any risk whatsoever. Now, that might blunt the edge of the tournament in terms of its, viewability, but that's the best tactic, undoubtedly.
Well, we mentioned high scoring frames at the shootout. Last season, we saw what could have been, I think, the lowest scoring. It was Elliot Slesser was playing. And I think there was 1 point scored after 8.5 minutes or something like that. But I spoke to him afterwards. And in the end, he managed to win because he fluked the ball. And in a time limit, as you said, 10 minutes of snooker, if you fluke with 90 seconds left, you're in the driver's seat. And even just the ball in hand factor, mistakes are just not acceptable. Fouls are not acceptable. And that pressure, I need to do something. And that's where the clear thinkers come in. Maybe, with all due respect, maybe Rob Milkins has sometimes not been the most composed. He's lost matches, lost frames that he should have won. Maybe that's what's held him back from winning the shootout.
Yeah,
Don't
and
know.
I also think circumstance, it is the most open, the most unpredictable event on the calendar. And maybe if luck goes against you, that's another reason. But yeah, I think he's equipped, certainly, to have a deep run. Obviously, this time he needs the points badly in terms of trying to stave off the dreaded threat of relegation. So maybe that's a pressure that will be a little too great for him. One thing I will say about the shootout, and I think a couple of people or a couple of groups of people on the tour deserve praise for this. The shootout is the toughest tournament of the season for the referees, because you've got so much to think about and you've got so much alien stuff to think about. So that's one, the referees do a really good job there. And secondly, the master of ceremonies. I thought Rob Walker last year was outstanding. Normally, Rob would maybe do 2, possibly 3 intros a day maximum. There he's doing, 32. So he did a great job last year, and I think he deserves a lot of praise for that.
Have you seen the draw for this year's event?
Well, I haven't, and I'll tell you why. I don't think it makes much difference, to be honest. A cat can beat a queen. One thing before I go, one of the great occasions at the shootout was when Michael Holt won it. Now, I've got a real soft spot for Michael Holt, so I was so pleased when he got over the line. And funnily enough, I saw him the next day up in Southport because the Players' Championship was taking place there. I think it might have been one of the last events before the COVID shutdown. Anyway, Holty in his first match played the Moroccan Amin Amiri, and Amiri clearly didn't know the rules, and on a couple of occasions he made fouls purely and simply because he was unaware of the rules. So Holt won that match pretty much as a consequence of the rules breaches, and then he went on to glory. So again, it just shows the unpredictable nature of the shootout.
You play the opponent, not the match, or you play the match. It depends on the situation. Yeah. Got a bit of correspondence before we wrap up. In fact, no. Before we get to that, let's look at what is coming up on the Snooker Hall podcast. The Contracts and Championships podcast, new podcast with Taylor Wilson and Rob Francis. We'll be hosting a Christmas quiz with some fellow podcast hosts. Taylor and Rob have invited me to take part. I don't know if I'll do very well, but we'll see what happens. It will be a good bit of fun. And they haven't told me who else is involved, so I don't know if they're setting me up for a fall here or not. Some cynics would say that I shouldn't be plugging other podcasts, but you know what? I believe in snooker solidarity. I would recommend checking out the Contracts and Championships podcast on Spotify and YouTube. The first bit of correspondence is actually related to what's coming up, so I'll bring that up now, actually. And it is from Brian McGovern, and it's actually for you, Phil. Hi, Dan. I hope you're keeping well. I have a memory regarding Phil Yates. As you know, I'm in Ireland. I remember years ago during the World Championship that Phil Yates would file reports back to RTE for their radio sports bulletins. He is a guy who knows his stuff. Best wishes, Brian McGovern. P.S. Any luck with Kelly Barker? Before we get to the Kelly part, what are your memories of working with RTE?
Very good memories. So many good people at that radio station. And of course, their interest was piqued because Ken Doherty at the time was doing so well. The 1997 World Championship, I was on there pretty much, it seemed, every few minutes giving reports back. And, back then, of course, the more work I did at the tournaments, the more money I made. And consequently, I was a big Ken Doherty fan because the deeper he went, the more reports I'd do, the more cash I'd have in the pocket. Of course, subsequently, I've become a very good friend with Ken, and we often laugh about it. But yeah, RTE, great clients. They loved their snooker, and it wasn't just Ken, of course. It was Fergal O'Brien. It was Ireland getting to the final of the World Cup in Thailand in 1996. Loads and loads of really good times working with all of the guys from the morning show right until the late show at night with Brian Carty, I think his name was, who was a big exponent of snooker and always had me on their big desk. I think it was 10:30 and 11:30 at night.
So you owe Ken a few quid, yeah, or maybe a beer or two.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
A beer or 1,000, I think, the amount of reports he inspired.
And to answer your question about Kelly Barker, Brian, you're not the only person who has asked if Kelly is coming back to the podcast, and I can confirm that yes, Kelly Barker will return to the Snooker podcast. We'll probably record an episode around Ali Pali time, a preview or a review, or maybe a mid view of the Masters. It depends on how our schedules work out, but she's always welcome here. And yep, by popular demand, you will hear Kelly Barker again on the Snooker Hall podcast.
Yeah, and by the way, let me just say one thing. Kelly Barker epitomises what's great about snooker. So many enthusiasts like her. Without people like Kelly, the game, the professional game, wouldn't exist as it does today. Of course, we have the Crucible Almanac as well, which is absolutely invaluable for us when we're in the commentary box. It's like being a high wire walker and having a safety net. So, yeah, I think people who do things for snooker like that out of the goodness of their heart and as enthusiasts, they should be applauded to the hilt.
No, I've spoken to Kelly and Chris a number of times, and they're good people. They're good people. And they're nice people. They're easy to talk to. They love the sport. What's not to like?
And in terms of the nuts and bolts of my job, sites like snooker.org and Q-Tracker as well have been an absolute boon. They're so well done. Snooker.org is a one-stop shop, isn't it? You know, information central. And then Q-Tracker in terms of head-to-heads. It gives you so much more insight than you could ever possibly wish for. Now, I like to think I've got a pretty good memory, but I haven't got a good enough memory to be able to give all the information I do. I have to do a lot of research, and Q-Tracker is just brilliant.
Question from Luke Moore, and I'm paraphrasing slightly. Should the pockets be like this for all events? We brought this up briefly earlier. You think, what is your right now opinion? Should the pockets be like this for all events?
Personally, no. But again, I would also say the pockets shouldn't be like they were for the International Championship. I think you have to get to a middle ground. The thing is, you see, with professional snooker tables, the stars and indeed the Rassons, all those stars in particular, they are so tight. And I don't think the average club player who's never seen a professional match fully appreciates how tight they are. You see, you have these close-ups on TV, and sometimes balls go in and you think, oh, you know, that's strange. How did that go in? But in general, the pockets are really, really tight, certainly in relation to a club table. And I always say this, I'm always banging the same drum. The middle pockets are ridiculously tight. Ever you go to a snooker tournament and you're there before the session begins and you can go down table side, just have a look from the yellow spot, the entrance into the middle pocket with the yellow on the spot and the ball in hand. It's a really tough shot. By the way, that's why Chris Wakelin's yellow with the cue ball under the ball cushion at the World Championship this year is certainly in the top 3 shots I've ever seen in my life.
Yes. I remember, yeah. And not only in terms of the technical, just the bravery to take it on.
Yeah, absolutely.
But technically, obviously, geometrically and physically, the margin for error is so small. It's
Well, they say it's like threading a needle, but I think actually threading a needle might be a little easier.
Yeah, at least you can actually see it close up. But when you're pointing from a distance, it's a few feet away from the yellow spot. So
yeah, so I was sitting on the fence in answer to the question there, but I think you need a middle ground. The problem is, of course, if you make the pockets too difficult, then players adapt and they become more safety orientated. Matches last much more longer than they do at the moment, and maybe then people would have a different opinion. So yeah, I think you don't want buckets, but you don't want them too tight either.
Neil Robertson had, as I mentioned, a little mini roundabout, and I suppose he is right in the fact that snooker should not be easy. And if you're playing at the elite level, maybe make the conditions a little bit more tricky, really separate the good from the very good. I get that. But I suppose, where is the line? When you take it too far, that's where you get negative consequences like, I don't want to take the risk, safety play, long dragged out frames. Then it's less exciting to watch. So yeah, there's a happy medium to be drawn here, I think.
And if you think the pockets are big now, which they aren't, but if you think they are, just go on YouTube and look at some of the old stuff from the 70s and the 80s. I mean, they are just immense, particularly the middle pockets. There was one shot that Alex Higgins played in that absolutely spellbinding clearance against Jimmy White at the Crucible. There's one shot there, a little ding back on a red. I genuinely don't think he could pot it these days. I don't think the entrance to the pocket would be large enough for it to go in. So, yeah, the game has changed considerably. It's changed for the better in terms of the standard. But the tables these days, even the International Championship where they were too large, even there, I think the pockets are a challenge more than they've ever been, certainly in relation to the 70s and 80s.
James from Bristol has asked, it's good to hear that Phil Yates will be on the podcast. Such an interesting snooker voice who we rarely hear from outside of commentary. I have a couple of questions for Phil, if that's okay. What do you think has been the best Crucible final? And, well, two, I heard you commentating on the Saudi event. Was that a difficult decision for you because of the concerns over the country's human rights record? It's a question players are often asked, but I wondered what commentators think too. Many thanks, James in Bristol.
Okay, well, the first one is very easy. The best World Final I think I've ever seen was the Mark Williams-John Higgins final because it combined two things. We've had the great drama of Taylor Davis in 85 and all of that stuff. We've had finals where someone is played out of their skin like Judd Trump. But I think the Williams-Higgins one combined both drama and quality. So that's my favourite World Championship final. With regard to Saudi Arabia, I went there with an open mind, and I must say, I've done, I think it's 6 or 7 trips out there now because I've done the World 9-Ball Pool Championship as well a couple of times. And the country I see is not quite like the one that's been painted in the media. Look, I'm seeing hotel venue. That's all I'm seeing in 2 big cities. I'm not an expert in any way on what's happening out there, but the hospitality has been terrific. And of course, the other thing you've got to say is in terms of both pool and in snooker, the organisations out there are working within the recognised infrastructure of both games. They're not trying to change the ecosystem, unlike Live Golf, which obviously was a very disruptive thing in terms of the PGA Tour and the DP World Tour. So I like the fact they're working inside that established ecosystem. The players certainly enjoy going there. And the Ronnie O'Sullivan Academy has got to be a good thing for snooker in the Middle East. And I think the establishment of a big ranking event in Saudi is good for Middle East snooker in particular. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say sport and politics shouldn't mix. I'm not going to be that naive. But from my point of view, I really have enjoyed the events that I've attended out there. I must say that.
One of the best comments I saw on social media ever was Nick Metcalf made a comment about that we've had so many prime ministers since X has won the World Championship or something like that, just to show how long it had been. Maybe it was John Higgins winning a Triple Crown event or something like that. We've had X number of prime ministers. And one of the comments was, keep politics out of sport. And I thought, you know what? That is good humour. That is good humour.
Well, if you want politics, get into sport because, of course, for many, many years, snooker was almost wrecked by internal strife and arguments. So, yeah, look, I actually studied economics and politics at university. The political life of a sport is unavoidable because that's normal life. But in terms of those Saudi Arabian events, the last one, the Riyadh Season Championship, was a revelation because it was in a lovely venue, the Global Theatre in Boulevard City. And the first session, it was sparsely attended, but the other sessions were phenomenally attended. And I think the game is definitely getting a foothold there. Really encouraging to see. The Ronnie O'Sullivan session on day one, pretty much packed out. And all of the other sessions were well attended also. So that was really encouraging.
Whether Ronnie's in decline or whether he will decline soon, he is an attraction. And as you saw in your trip to the US, like, he's known. Name a snooker player, Ronnie O'Sullivan. He's the first one you think of, and clearly it's the same in Saudi Arabia. I don't think it's a problem for snooker to use him as a draw, to use him as look at us. I really don't see a problem with doing that, because Ronnie's got a lot out of the sport, and if they can, even if he's giving it back or they're taking it back from him, to get something back from Ronnie O'Sullivan, I don't think it's a problem at all. And if it shows bigger crowds, then yeah, I have no problem with that at all.
Well, he's adored out there. There's no doubt about it. And obviously, he's a massive international figure. And the Snooker Academy, by the way, is a state-of-the-art facility. And I don't think they could have picked a better person to organise it than Nigel Bond, because he's a very well-regarded coach and a lovely guy as well. I think he's the perfect personality to head that venture.
Oh, well said. Nigel Bond is he's the cliche, good snooker man. Yeah. So, final bit of correspondence is from Sean. A few points to bring up. The moron in the crowd who was trying to distract Judd was a disgrace. I don't understand why the referee or security doesn't have them thrown out. Other fans around him, it sounded like a man, could identify the culprit and point them out. They don't deserve to be there. They ruin the experience for the players and real snooker fans. And as a second point here,
I would endorse that, by the way, completely.
So would I. And the second point is, who are your overachievers and what are your standout moments of the season? I was going to ask that myself, but then I saw Sean had written it, so I thought I'd ask you.
Yeah, I think, well, I'll go back to the Riyadh Season Championship. Zhao Zintong winning that, I think, was very important for him and also for the game, because you always want your world champions to prosper. It demeans the title to a certain extent if a world champion the following season hardly shows up and he's pretty anonymous. So I was really pleased he didn't just win that, but he also won it playing very stylish snooker. I thought Mark Selby, the way he finished off at the Champion of Champions, was absolutely outstanding. To make all those big breaks, to overcome a player like Judd Trump in a tournament on home soil in Leicester. Yeah, that was a good moment as well. And, I'll go back right to the start of the season. Stephen Maguire, what a great player he is. What a classy player he is. Now, he won the Championship League, and I was really pleased about that, because he deserves success the way he plays. He plays the game correctly, and he's always a great watch, isn't he? He's got his heart on his sleeve. He whacks the table. Sooner or later, he's going to get himself injured, by the way. But I was really pleased to see Maguire win that. So, yeah, maybe a little bit off the wall highlights, but there you go.
Well, speaking of punching the table, Elliot Slesser. How did he not break his hand? The sound that made when he punched the table.
Every player wants to win badly, but Slesser wants it really badly. And I think eventually he will break through. He is so intense, so determined to make his mark.
I think he's a realist as well. Like, he knows he's playing good players and he has to perform at a good level. He literally said to me, if a player makes a century break against me, tip my hat, try and win the next frame. And I think that kind of realism, that mature attitude, I think it will help him. The fact that he knows that things aren't always going to go smoothly for him. And if he has to let out his frustration, he went on to win that match. And he played quite well against Zach Surety. Pretty solid player is Zach. So if he has to punch the table, risk breaking his hand. Hope he doesn't do it too often. But in a sport where sometimes the answers can be a little bit cookie cutter, and we expect perfection, we expect the poster boy to behave in this way, it's to have someone who's a little bit more expressive. I really don't think it's a problem. There are limits, of course, but...
And one lead off from what you just said, Zach Surety, one of the most improved players on the circuit. I can wish him only the very best. And he might be another good candidate for the shootout,
Yeah, I didn't think of him. I didn't think of him.
Surety is
And he is in it, yeah.
Surety is no sure thing, but no one is.
See, that's why we love you, Phil. That's why we love you. As I mentioned, the Contracts and Championships podcast is hosting a Christmas quiz, and that should be out pretty soon. For the Scottish Open, to put it bluntly, I'm away for the Christmas week. I'm going to be sitting in Spain. So I won't be recording an episode around the Scottish Open or the final. Then after the Masters, we'll have an episode with Kelly Barker, hopefully. Then it is the German Masters. I'll be heading over to Berlin. My mum is going as well because she's got the snooker bug. And hopefully I'll be speaking with some fans and other snooker, maybe some snooker podcast hosts when I'm out there. And that's all the planning that there is at the moment. But Phil, I want to say huge thanks for your time. It's good to get some insight from someone who's seen the game fairly closely for a number of years now, and I appreciate your time. I really do.
I've been covering snooker since 1988. My first UK championship, Doug Mountjoy won it at the age of 46. We thought this will never, ever be repeated. And now 50-year-olds are winning ranking events. So, yeah, that's how long I've been around. 37 years on the tour.
So, on that, I actually got I mentioned it maybe recently, but Neil Folds was on over the summer. And in one of the following episodes, I made a little joke. Neil, being so inexperienced in the media, I had to hold his hand and walk him through it. But then I got a message saying, Neil Folds has been doing this for years. I was like, yeah, I know, it's a joke. But you've been doing it for maybe longer than Neil?
I've been commentating since 91, so 34 years, yeah. Yeah, it's flown by.
Time flies when you're having fun. Plans for Christmas, New Year? What are you up to?
I'm going away, actually, on the holiday, so really looking forward to that. But I will be back for the tournament that's very close to my heart, the Championship League, the invitation version, where you see lots and lots of centuries. So, yeah, that's going to be my January staple.
Sounds good. Well, if I don't speak to you before then, I wish you a Merry Christmas. I wish you a Happy New Year and safe travels. Thanks for your time today, Phil. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you.